we're swapping out MCs for this section because our next speaker is our MC. So Jaime Lopez is our principal developer advocate. He's worked for years with me specifically on the Digital Toolkit, but his role is much more expensive than that. And so we're going to have him talk exactly about the Digital Toolkit and how it applies to our whole ecosystem. So welcome, Jaime.
Thank you. All right. Welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you for the introduction. All right, let's get this show on the road. This next part is the Banno Digital Toolkit part of things. It's important to know, as you might decide from the name, you do need Banno for this. So if you're on an alternative digital banking platform, this won't necessarily apply to you, but hopefully you'll see some nice things here that you'll like. So let's go through that. So today's talk is specifically about one part of the Banno Digital Toolkit, and that is on plugins. So plugins are UI widgets. That's our name for these UI widgets. They're custom things that you can build to extend the Banno experience. There's a lot more that goes along with that as part of the Banno Digital Toolkit. We'll talk a little bit about that and what pairs together real nicely like peanut butter and jelly. But today, we're going to be talking about three sort of main topics related to these custom UI widgets called plugins. We're going to talk about designing them and good practices for that. We've learned a lot over the last few years of what works really well and what is a little bit challenging to deal with. We're going to talk about developing plugins and some of the software architecture decisions that you need to make and that you need to be aware of, and some general tips and tricks that go with building plugins. So first, let's talk about designing them. Here we have a little bit of a reminder of what that is, or for some of you, this might be brand new. This is the sort of basic anatomy of a plugin card. It's important to know that these are ways to extend the Banno UI. Plugins appear on the user's dashboard. That is the primary screen that you'll see in Banno. And we'll have a screenshot later, but just visualize, somebody going into the local community bank or credit union's mobile app or their online website, and they're going to want to see pretty common things: accounts, balances, transactions. There's more that's natively built into Banno itself and comes out of the box. But you can also build your own custom content in these small little widgets for quick, easy access to data and to do quick interactions. These are expected and always operate across Banno Online for the web, Banno Mobile, the native app for Android, and Banno Mobile, the native app for iOS. They are expected to do that. But to be really clear, the sort of main basic technologies that you'll be using and building with are basically the languages of the web: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So you don't need to go out there and learn some weird particular, Jack Henry specific programming language. You don't have to go find these very expensive contractors or developers to do this stuff. This is the lingua franca of the web. It's some of the most common technologies that you could expect out there. Should be fairly easy that you either have this capability on staff, or you could probably fairly easily and inexpensively acquire talent that can build this sort of stuff. So what they'll be building is a UI widget that looks kind of like what we've got on screen here. So each plugin card has a card title that is configurable, that's rendered and built by Banno itself, but configurable with your name goes here or your plugin card name goes here. There's an optional primary action button if you want to not just display information to the user, but let them take action on it. That will navigate them from what we call the card face and take them out to the expanded view. But the main area here is actually numbered 3 on this item, on this anatomy, which is that web content, right? So like you put your stuff goes here, fill in the blank sort of thing. So we'll talk more through this, but that's some of the basics of what this will look like. And here's a pretty prototypical view of what Banno would look like. And as you can see, it's got this hypothetical institution's branding and scheme. And this is the dashboard that users will tend to see. And just to be really clear, Just to be really clear, all sorts of data that we can see and just sort of like common sense, or think about how you use digital banking for your credit union or your bank. What is the absolute #1 thing that you go into log in to see? It's probably the account balance. How much money do I have in there? Way down at #2, it's a huge drop off of #2 is, what are the most recent transactions? I just swiped my card, did that transaction go through? And probably also, let me go take a look at the balance again. Which means, as wonderful as all the plugins that are out there today and that everybody's doing, just from the data and the surveys tells us that it's gonna be #3, right? Going for your plugin is probably not the primary reason, because most people tend to, especially on the go for mobile, look at the account balances, they wanna look at the most recent transactions, and they might wanna see other things. They might wanna know, oh, here's my most up-to-date credit score. They might wanna see, I was actually looking to apply for a line of credit. And so what you see on here is built-in cards that a card-like UI we use for accounts, and we actually see a couple of accounts on here. Little widgets for like Zelle and transfers and all this other stuff. A little card for transactions that's built in natively into Banno that comes out of the box with the Banno digital banking platform. And then we see here a line of credit application that is a hypothetical plugin. So just to be really clear, this one doesn't exist anywhere. You can't ask our sales team, how do I find that line of credit application? This particular one doesn't exist. It's just an illustrative example. But it's meant to fit in seamlessly to that digital banking experience. It shouldn't whack you over the head with blinking lights and everything. You're like, oh, look at this thing here. Stick out like a sore thumb. It should just sort of fit seamlessly in there. And so what we see here first is the sort of first half of how plugins tend to render themselves, and that is as a card face. So the face of the card is the thing that shows up on the dashboard, and we really want that to be, fulfilling these 3 attributes of being glanceable, responsive, and make really good use of the limited space. And we'll talk more in detail about each of these. Okay, so what in the world do we mean when we say glanceable? Just to use an analogy, I'm wearing a smartwatch here. I can very quickly see it's 3:22 p.m., it's 63 degrees, and the humidity is 28%, just like that. 1 to 2 seconds tops. Right? If I want to dive in, let me see what the forecast is for tomorrow or 3 days from now, I can go in and go into an expanded view and see more, sure, but I literally just want to see what time is it. It's 3:22 as of me saying this. So you want quick information on that card face. You want it to be the most important information, because again, you want to be wasting people's time, but read all this stuff. It's no, they just want to be able to see it at a glance while they're looking at things. And it means it's probably going to be summary material, right? You don't have a lot of time and effort. Again, you're really talking account balances, most recent transactions, and then quick information that I might put there to retrieve for a plugin. So here's some examples on screen of some hypothetical things. So if I was building a investments plugin, what sorts of things would I put on the card face? Well, I might put, dollar amounts for accounts. So maybe I have dollar amounts for cryptocurrency assets, ETF or stock assets, or maybe I've invested in precious metals. Every user wants to see number go up. So that's probably the number they should put on there so they can quickly glance and get that information. If you have a credit scoring plugin, the credit score should be the most important thing that you put on there, right? That's the whole purpose that somebody wanted that plugin on their dashboard. And if you were doing something like financial literacy, you'll probably want to put which step am I on this multi-step process to learning and engaging. Some other things, if you had wealth management, same thing. You might want to show total users' assets, total values. If it's a marketing type material, you want to show quickly and easily the most concrete and interesting and personally relevant to that user marketing content. Maybe I'm interested in a home equity line of credit. Maybe somebody else in the audience is actually more interested in an automobile loan. You should be able to figure that out and make sure you're putting the most relevant info and make that as personal and personalizable for that user as possible. The next thing we said is that the card face should be responsive. Now remember, I said at the beginning here, these plugins are required to be active across Banno Online for the web and Banno Mobile, the native apps for Android and iOS. And we do sometimes get questions. How do I make this plugin only available on mobile? How do I make it only available online? Can I make it only available for Android versus iOS? Those are wonderful ideas, but today you can't do that. It is required that that plugin is available everywhere. I think you might hear our CTO at some point say, like, raise your hands out there if you tell your friends, oh, I use, mobile Instagram. I use Instagram web. It's like, no, you don't. You use Instagram, you use Facebook, you use TikTok. Like, users expect that stuff to be available everywhere, and that's why we need these plugin cards to work across Banno Online and Banno Mobile. And what that means is, although you can go in and you can configure the height of your plugin, Banno itself gets to decide the width that makes sense. So if you can imagine, we show here hypothetically how the width could be different on Banno Online. Let's say I'm viewing this on a 4K, high density, very large monitor. I've got some room to roam. It'd be nice to not have a really skinny little card on this huge expanse of space. And if I have an iPhone SE, one of the smallest, iOS devices, well, that wider card doesn't make sense. I kind of need that to get narrowed in. So that's what we mean when we say that the card face needs to be responsive. It's not going to be pixel perfect. You're going to have to base it off of what will make sense based on the available width for the device and the card width that you're going to get. And again, you don't know that necessarily. You don't get to control that. So really want to key in on those responsive web design principles. Also, really wish we would document somewhere some actual hard limit. I don't think there is any defined hard limit for the height of a plugin. Like, I'm not advising you all to make a 10,000 pixel tall plugin card, but I think you could. I don't think the system will actually stop you from doing that. But is that a great user experience? I mean, probably not. Right? Who wants to be on their phone just scrolling for 5 minutes to get past your plugin card so they can see the rest? Nobody wants it. So you have a limited amount of space. You want to make sure that you're putting the most important information on that card face. The card face is in context of everything else the users got on their dashboard, which means you want to get rid of any non-functional elements. I know this is going to be really hard for some of the institutions out there, but believe it or not, when a user is in your app or they've signed into your digital banking, they know which institution they're looking at. They don't need your logo there on the plugin card face. If you're a fintech, it's probably not your brand, it's probably the institution's brand. They don't need your fintech's logo right there in the card face. They want to see whatever it is. And you kind of want to not have a bunch of busy, weird background stuff, right? You should try to fit in as seamlessly as possible into the existing Banno design scheme. So ideally, you would use a non-textured background, because if you start putting textures of like wood grain or hexagonal tiles, it's going to get real difficult to actually like read the content on there. And although you certainly can make multifaceted plugins that do multiple different things, odds are pretty good you'll have to think about that very carefully. You don't necessarily want to say, well, I have the one plugin that does everything. So here's an example of a hypothetical plugin that does investments in cryptocurrency and stocks and precious metals, but it also gives me my balances for my other items. It does my credit score, it does financial literacy, it chops onions for me. Like, that's just too much. You can have more than one plugin. There is no upper limit, as far as I know, to those. Somewhere between infinity and one, I would lean more towards the one, but like, you can have several if you'd like. So that's all about the card face. Very heavily restricted on like, quick. Give me at a glance as a user, as an account holder, as a member. Quickly give me the info. In contrast, the expanded view is where you can expect longer sessions. If you have slower calculations, this is where you're going to want to put them, and you just flat out have more space. So we'll talk a little bit more there about what it's like to go from the card face and all of its limitations in navigating the user out to the expanded view. So, unlike the card face, which I spent a lot of time saying, you're probably number 3 behind account balance and recent transactions, and you're like the 3rd most popular thing that the user does in digital banking. You know, quickly get to the point, make sure you have that user get in and out really fast. If the user navigates to the expanded view for your plugin, that's a good signal that they want to spend more time interacting with whatever it is your plugin does, right? Like they have intentionally navigated to the expanded view. There's no automatic way to like cause the expanded view to take over the screen. Like the user clicked a button somewhere to make that happen. So they're telling you, I want to spend more time on this. I want to take a deeper dive into this. And that means that the focus is going to be different. It's not just, I have more space, I can make a bigger plugin card face. That's not a good idea. What you want is a different focus there because somebody said, I want more than just a quick summary. I want to interact with this a little bit longer and a little bit more in depth. So when it comes to slower calculations, I'm not going to tell you that like slower is better. Very few things in life is slower better. Faster is probably better for most things, especially when it comes to computation and getting through your financial life, right? But if you do have something that is difficult or expensive or challenging to look up and calculate, or maybe you're reaching out to a third-party vendor that has some sort of information that you need to call real time and carve through and analyze and run it through your machine learning wood chipper, this is where you're going to want to put it. You're going to want to put it in the expanded view because, again, the user said, I'm willing to wait. Show me not just my credit score, show me all reasons why my credit score ended up being calculated the way it was. Don't just show me number go up, here's my total value of assets or wealth management or investments. Show me all my assets, what you might predict is going to happen based on where it's going. The user has told you that they have more time, but don't abuse that. Again, if you can make it faster, make it faster. That's going to be a better experience. It's going to set you apart from the competition. But again, in the expanded view, you do have more time. And as I said, and kind of what it goes in the name on the tin for the expanded view, you quite literally have more space. Whereas the card face says, hey, you only have so many pixels to deal with. Try to be really mindful of what you're doing here. With the expanded view, you have more space to play with. That space will differ based on whether you're in Banno Online, which means you're going to get that full browser experience, however wide and tall the user has made that browser. And on Banno Mobile for Android and iOS, you're going to get more or less most of that screen, almost all of that screen, but it is still a mobile device, which means it is much more limited and isn't something that you should confuse or conflate with like a 4K monitor. But you do have more space, which means that you can show less important, sounds bad, or less urgent information, or information that is a little bit more accessory, or perhaps less frequently used. Maybe I see, hey, here's something I look at every quarter, once a year. I take a little deeper dive. I get closer to tax time. I get closer to the holidays or whatever it is. Or if your plugin has settings of like, which things do I want to show? Do I want to show the most recent week, the most recent month? Do I want to show this account first or that account first? Settings and other things that users will not need immediately or with every time that they load the dashboard and sign into digital banking. You want to put that into the expanded view. So how do you go about activating the expanded view? I mentioned like, hey, generically, there's a way to go from that card face over to the expanded view. Two different ways that we define. The simplest and easiest way to make that happen is to configure a primary action button. You only get the one button, and there's limited configurability as to what you can do there. Excuse me. You can largely set the title and where it's going to go to. Again, super easy to do. You can configure that pretty easily right out of the box, right in the Banno admin back office suite for the institution. But if you encounter a situation where you say, well, I need more than one place to go to, and at a minimum, we're talking like 2 different places to go to, 3 places to go to, 4 different places to go to, you'll need to not use a configured action button, because again, you only get the one, and it only goes to one location. And instead, you'll want to use our plugin bridge. Our plugin bridge is an open source JavaScript module that you can incorporate into your web app. It knows how to communicate with Banno Online and Banno Mobile to activate the expanded view, and it can go to different locations. So in this hypothetical example we've got, let's imagine a plugin that accepts online payments, but also lets you take cash out of an ATM. Odds are pretty good. Those are 2 totally different URL paths that you have in your web application. You can use the plugin bridge to annotate your anchor tags that are going to go off to someplace. Maybe one goes to the /payments route for your plugin, and the other goes to the /ATM route or whatever it is that you come up with. The plugin bridge is the best way to do that. And what we're seeing is that there's almost an even split between the 2 of these. We have gotten questions before of, does the plugin bridge, excuse me, is the plugin bridge obsolete the use of the configured action button? No, there's plenty of plugins out there that we see. Like, I see no reason to incorporate the plugin bridge here because you only have the one location you're going to anyways. So you might as well go with the easiest thing. You don't have to maintain that sort of thing. So there's a trade-off and balance between simpler but less configurable, more powerful, but also more responsibility involved. So think about this as you're developing. And also, when it comes to theming, we mentioned that plugins should not stick out like a sore thumb. So be aware that just about every financial institution has a configured light theme and dark theme. I'm a dark mode user. I get very upset when there isn't a dark theme configured for something. It just, you know, just shines a bright light at me and really sticks out. And you don't want to stick out like a sore thumb. So even though your particular application may say, by golly, we should make our application look like, you know, hot pink and neon green, unless that's the financial institution's actual theme color, I do not recommend do that. I recommend following the guide that they have. You can programmatically retrieve the theme data from Banno itself, but be aware, you don't have to do that dynamically, and I would not advise doing that dynamically for reasons we will talk about. Because institutions do not frequently change their theme, which means every once in a while you could go take a look at it, see if it changed, reconfigure your plugin, do a new deploy, and then be available. You don't need to, every time the plugin loads, to see, hey, did the institution change their theme today? Raise your hands in the audience if your institution changes your theme once a week, once a month, or even once a quarter. Yeah, I didn't think so. It doesn't change that frequently, right? It's like a big deal. So make sure you're being diligent about keeping up to date with the themes, but I wouldn't stress too much about needing to be dynamic with it. And the reason for that is based on some of the development topics that we're going to talk about here. So let's change tracks into the developing side. What are really important things to know about for your software architecting? Well, although plugins are displayed in Banno's UI, the actual rendering side happens on your external service. So your external service, somewhere out there, will get called by Banno, excuse me, get called by Banno, handle authentication with OAuth and OpenID Connect, wonderful technology standards that we support, generate web page content, and then that gets displayed on screen in Banno's UI. We don't host that. We don't deploy that. That's something that is in your public-facing external web service somewhere. And what we mean by public-facing is that it has to be accessible by users without requiring them to be on a specific network or requiring them to have a particular VPN. So keep that in mind, right? But it's something that we've seen work out pretty well for folks who are able to run that or have some service run it for them, because this decouples the life cycle of Banno itself and our deployments, and we deploy multiple times per day for Banno, versus your own deployment, so you don't have to do something like, oh, well, Banno's gonna deploy at this time, we better line up our deployment at that time. You can prototype, you can go live, you can maintain, you can retire at any time that you want, because this service lives separately outside of Banno itself. Excuse me. As a reminder, this is what plugins look like on the user's dashboard in Banno. And you will want to heavily cache data that's going to appear on that card face. Remember, Banno is available across hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of community banks and credit unions. And in the aggregate, that means millions upon millions upon millions of users. So unless you want your engineers to cry at night and quite possibly during the day, unless you enjoy having outages because way too many people came to view your plugin and it knocked over your servers, you're gonna have to pre-calculate and cache data, not only to protect yourselves around handling the high volume, but remember what I said, time is very important. You have to move really quick through that glanceable, quick reference information. So caching is gonna be your friend. And another thing you'll need to think about is authentication. There's two main topics here, the impact of web browsers and our own authentication framework. So if you didn't know, let me get you educated here. Modern web browsers are increasingly restrictive when it comes to protecting the user's security and the user's privacy. The main examples here are cross-site cookies that they keep locking down and locking down and locking down. We have information about that on jackhammer.dev, as well as increasingly restrictions around same origin policy. So please go read the documentation here, but at least just be aware of that. Also, I mentioned our authentication framework. It's based on OpenID, Connect, and OAuth. It's great. It's authenticated information about the user, but it is not to be conflated with a session manager. It doesn't manage a session. You need to manage your own session and possibly run the user through the auth cycle again pretty seamlessly. But if you're asking us, hey, Banno, can you make the session longer? Like, you're probably doing the wrong thing. So keep that in mind. And just to quickly round things out, some tips and tricks. You'll find that you can use almost any possible tech stack that's out there as long as it speaks the language of the web, as long as it can handle HTML, CSS, and JavaScript over HTTPS. Although a lot of our examples online that you'll find are based on Node.js, that's really just an artifact of the bread and butter sort of skills that we have on Banno. But there is, I'm aware, a Fortran web framework. And although I do not recommend you use a Fortran web framework for your application, you could if you wanted to. That's how free and how many options that you have for this. So for a tech stack, you can bring your own tech stack, whatever it is. When it comes to restrictions, I'm gonna split between there are actual restrictions of you cannot do this thing, and then there are things that are just flat out not supported. Not because we explicitly made them not supported, but because we haven't built into it. So remember that the user security and user experience is always protected. You can go to jackhammer.dev, you can see the things that are explicitly restricted. You can't go slurp up the user's contacts. You can't surreptitiously turn on their camera. You can't turn on their microphone or get geolocation. These are hard restrictions that you'll find in jackany.dev. And also, on the not supported side, although this is all based on web technology, plugins are not to be confused with modern web browsers. So a plugin card is not the same as having access to the full Google Chrome, the full Mozilla Firefox, or the full Opera, or et cetera. And I mentioned our consumer API. That's the same API that Banno itself, Jack Henry itself, uses to build Banno's UI. It's a great way to securely retrieve the user's accounts, balances, and transactions. It goes together really well, like peanut butter and jelly. If you somehow didn't notice on your cup that there is a jackany.dev URL and there's a QR code, here it is again for you nice people. And to recap, we talked about developing plugins, we talked about designing them, we talked about tips and tricks. There's tons of them available out there. There's probably a bunch of you all fintechs that I have seen here who have your own plugins that you're offering to banks and credit unions. If you're a bank or credit union, if you built something cool, we never hear about it until you show us. And sometimes your buddies at another institution say, hey, how come we don't have that? Why is Jack Henry holding back? I'm like, they built it themselves. It belongs to them. Go ask them. And thank you very much. Thanks for coming to my talk.